Hey guys, welcome back to class. Today we have a beginner stances class, which is excellent because we're going to actually train the most important and commonly used stances in ultimate bow, get a good leg workout along with that, and get some bow training, which of course this is our foundational element to our bow training, which is often overlooked. So this will be an awesome class. We're going to get a warm-up in first, work on stance training, and then get a cool down in. Very important class for every single ultimate bow student, guys. Okay, first of all, let's go ahead and get started with our warm-up, just arm circles. Both arms going forward, just lubricating that shoulder joint. I wanted to do a stances only class that allows us to realize the importance of our stances and how they actually build strong techniques for combat angles. Let's reverse the other direction. And of course integrating into your kata training. Because we learn each individual technique, but sometimes it's good to take a look at the stance itself and then also at the upper body movements itself and then combine them together to make a much more well-rounded movement. Okay guys, torso twist. Now if you have a background in traditional martial arts, whether it be karate or taekwondo or whatever it may be, if you might not though, but if you have a background in traditional martial arts, you probably already have done a lot of stances work. Our stances, okay, now roll the hips. The stances that we do are very similar, based in a Japanese style karate. There are some slight variations to the way we use it with the staff though, other direction. So yeah, if you see a stance that's a little bit different than what you already do, that's okay, make a slight modification. But the point is, you're probably more set up for success already. Now let's roll the knees. If you've never done martial arts before, stances are probably going to be one of the hardest things for you to get down the other direction. They don't seem that natural in some ways, and a lot of beginners that have never done martial arts before just totally overlook the stances because they're so focused on, where do my hands go, which direction am I going with this and that, and they totally forget about it. So that's why it's so important. Next thing we're going to do, get a little bit of kind of traditional karate style blocking and punching. No particular exact style that we have to do this in, but what we're going to do is squat down. We're going to come back up and just do 2 straight center punches. All right, guys, ready? Begin. Squat. Come back. Squat. And I'm coming up, leading with a different hand each time. These are just warm-up strikes. The technique doesn't have to be perfect. Good job. Now we're going to do a downward block. What we're going to do is a small preparation and then block. Preparation and then block. All right, again, warm-up techniques here. We're in a little bit of a high line horse stance. Begin. Good job, guys. Next, we're doing a high block or upper block. So we're going to line up with our fingers pointed straight outward at an angle. Just pull our arm downward as we bring the other arm up. Turn, rotate our hand out, catching an overline strike that's coming at the high side of our body, right? Again, this isn't a karate training class, so techniques don't have to be perfect. This is a warm-up. Obviously, if you know these techniques, I'll get some practice in. job, guys. Next, we're doing an inside-out block. To prepare, we're just going to fold the arms. It's like fold the arms. One arm is across, one arm is up. Turn, blocking inside out. Other side, fold, block inside out. Okay, next we're going to squat down, come up, do a front snap kick straight in front of us. We'll squat and do the other side. Begin. Actually breathing out, good exertions, good inhales. All right, good job. Okay. Spread your legs apart wide. Take a deep breath in. Let's lean into our left leg. And right leg. Okay, come back up. All right, we're just going to do leg swings where we don't really set our foot down, but we continue the motion. Starting with left leg first is fine. Begin. Switch legs. If you have to set your foot down, it's just fine. All right. Okay, just final warm up here. We get some jumping jacks in. Begin. All right, guys, ready to go in the next part of our class. All right, guys, welcome to the stances section. So in today's class, we're going to focus on the active stances, which are the ones we move in, where we're practicing our traditional techniques. We're doing our kata, we're doing our combat techniques, not so much the attention stance or the relaxed stance or the ready position. Those are nice and important. We use them at the beginning of end of kata sometimes in a very formal way. So you could look at that stances lesson to take a look at those. But to get actual physical practice in, we're going to focus on these. The first one is the front stance. So you've probably already watched the lesson. You've already seen it. You're like, okay, I know how to do a front stance. The front stance that we do in Ultimate Bow and Bojutsu is actually a little bit bladed. So to get there, you can follow along with me. Your feet are together first. Take your right foot out, shoulder width. Okay, now slide it back to where it's equidistant. So this is like if I had an exact square. Okay, I have the exact same distance from my left leg to my right leg, from the front to the back. That's pretty shallow. We need to take it back even further. It's almost twice as long as that. Now, from here, my front knee is bent. Okay, I'm still just about able to see my toes. My back knee is also slightly bent. I'm going to turn my back foot about 35 degrees off to the right, about a 35-degree angle. Okay, so not 45, not 90 or anything like that. Yeah, maybe about 35. My front foot is not directly straight on. It's a little bit curved inward. Okay, a little bit inward. It's not directly at 12 o'clock like this, because that would really force me to be totally straight on and very squared up to my target or wherever direction that I'm facing. I actually am going to have that foot turn a little bit, and my hips, my front hip is popping out more towards the front, the back hip is bladed. So look, my chest is actually off at an angle. My chest is not straight on. It's also not straight off to the right 90. It's a little bit bladed. And when I say the word bladed all the time, and what I mean is my shoulders are offline as well, okay, because they're a little bit angular. So this is bladed, and what that does is it gives you more power on the front side of your body, because like in Shotokan or a traditional art like that, we use a bladed front stance, and whenever we do that, we're just putting everything we possibly have behind the leading leg and the leading arm, like if we're doing a high block, very bladed, whereas some systems have a wider front stance, and they're almost more squared on like this compared to like this. Whereas the idea behind being bladed and linear is to totally line up your body, your hips, your legs, your shoulder, your arm, your forearm, all behind that one attack. There's an attack coming, you put everything behind it, and then you're able to counterattack. Or if you are doing a forward incoming punch, everything comes behind it. And we really want to copy that concept with our front stance with Bojutsu. Some of our strikes, such as our overhead front strike goes down into our front stance. And we have some combinations that we continue on, like 4-point, 6-point, 3-point, and we'll continue them on from our front stance. So that's why the front stance is designed the way it is, and that's why we want to get to it properly whenever we do use it in our forms, or just when we're practicing our traditional techniques. Okay, so to step out into it, that was kind of a guide, but you want to get to the point where you can kind of comfortably step out. I'm not too long here, also not too wide. It's not going to be a very natural, comfortable stance. I mean, the most natural thing we have is kind of just walking around. Beyond that, we don't get into really deep, wide stances in everyday life very much. So that's the front stance we're going to do. If I want to get to the right leg in front, a right front stance, same thing. I could take my left leg out, slide it back, turn the angle, turn the right foot a little bit. It's almost a little too wide right there. Bend forward. In terms of weight distribution, about 60% of the weight's on the front leg, 40% on the back. Obviously, that's not an exact science or anything. It gives you a good idea, though. I'm not overly dependent on the front side of my body or on the back side of my body, but I have a little bit more lean on the front because that's the emphasis of the momentum of the direction I am attacking or blocking. So when you do a front stance, you are committing to a forward movement. Well, of course, you can also move backward, but most of the time, you're more of an expansive outward push type of stance, right? So here, step. Now, if we're going to change legs, what we do is kind of a step through or a pass through motion. Rather than stepping like this, or just like having a big stomp, bringing up our knee high, we tend to do this slide through, where you slide the back leg in and out. It's very clean. It keeps the foot closer to the ground. It's a nice aesthetic visual presentation for kata training as well. If I was actually fighting someone with my staff, would I be stepping through like this all the time? Not in that exact way, but I would be keeping my feet fairly close to the ground. I wouldn't want to hop up and down too much. I want to keep a pretty low center of gravity. If you keep a lower center of gravity, you're able to manipulate, move, use better footwork, okay? So that is one aspect or one benefit of training in this way with your stances. Excuse me, it's over here. That's our front stance. Again, I don't have my staff with me because I'm so focused on stances right now, I don't even want to confuse my mind, okay? So we're going to get some practice in because, again, our classes are not just about lecturing. It's more about getting physical practice, drilling it into your muscle memory. So let's just start in an attention stance, and I'll just make this super easy. I'll face back to you as well. We're going to step out into a left front stance. Up. And back. Again. 2. 3. 4. 5. Good. Okay, we're going to step out right side front this time. 1, 2, 3. And you might notice when I step out, I slip a little bit. That's more of an aspect of this actual floor. This is bamboo. It's a little bit slicker. If I had shoes on or if I was on a different type of environment, that really shouldn't be happening as much either. 3. Even then, I try to mitigate that. 4, 5. Okay, nice. So we're going to do a walking drill. Get as much space as you have. If you need to walk in and out of the hallway in your house, whatever, let's do it, guys. I'm going to start in the corner here, and we're going to do walking practice. So step out, slide in and out, 60-40 weight distribution. Keep a little bit of the blade of the shoulder and the upper body. My neck and my head are also level. I'm looking straight forward. In and out. That's another thing of this, in and out. We want to keep our back straight and our head up and our eyes forward. And go. Step. And let's turn. We're going to go back now. Step. Hup. 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 Time. Right. Guys, let's do that again, okay? This time when we get to the end, we're actually going to work on stepping backward. Keep that head up, those eyes level, though. I'm telling you, I have a lot of students who do their kata. They do a great job, but they're looking down. They're looking down. You need to be able to see what's happening. You need to be able to see the opponent. Pay attention to the striking target, to the angle. Where are you actually hitting? Be totally aware of your situation. Step. Hup. 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 Freeze. Make sure you're still in a good stance. Every single stance is good. Not just the first one. Hup. Hup. Now we're going to step backward. Okay, so right leg steps back. Or whichever leg it was for you. Hup. Still 60-40. Hup. 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 Time. Good job, guys. Okay, go ahead and grab your staff. So just to get a feel for what the stance feels like with one of our techniques, right? Let's practice our overhead front strike into it'll be a right front stance. The same stance I was just practicing. Now I've added an attack to it. I've added an upper body motion. Notice that by stepping forward and having that blade and popping of the hip and the shoulder, it gives you more forward momentum with the strike that you're doing. Stay with me, guys. Okay, let's switch. Left dominant. Freeze. Is that stance still good? If anything, I think I noticed my stance got a little bit deeper, so I might need to watch that as well. All right, good. Now we're going to do striking with our walking movement. Hup. I'm going to switch. Overhead front strike, other side. Switch. Switch. Let's turn around. Good stances, guys. Stay with me. Let's move on to the next traditional stance that we're going to practice today, and that is the long front stance. So our front stance already tends to be fairly long with some of the strikes that we practice, right? But the long front stance is 1 foot length longer, or 1 foot length longer than the front stance. And this is mainly used for our front thrust, the traditional technique front thrust. Now, whenever we do thrust and combat bow and like a real fight or sparring, we don't actually step in this deep. It's just overcommitting too much. But for our kata demonstration and for our practice, it does also strengthen our legs. It does give us a lot of forward push and momentum. So there are also benefits to practicing a long front stance. But the long front stance, you can see this would be a front stance. And this is a long front stance. So at least another foot lengths away in the front. My back foot is still at about 35-degree angle. Fairly narrow. I mean, you can't really keep it that wide and have that much length in your stance. So we're going to get practice in on this today. Hey, if anything, we're getting reps in. We're building up our leg muscles. And we're ingraining the importance of this stance so that every time you do the next classes, the other lessons, you're going to have a better foundation. Okay, this is the way I should be doing this stance. All right, guys, so to get into the long front stance, we step our leg out and back. We're like, okay, this is our front stance. We just practiced the front stance, the long front stance. If you take your foot where your toes are, put your heel there. That's pretty much a long front stance, okay? Because everyone has a different size foot, so that will give you an idea about how much deeper you'd want to step. And I also have about 70% on the front leg, about 30 on the back. There's a little bit more weight distribution on the front than on the back now that we're so deep in here. Okay, otherwise, everything else about the stance is pretty much the same. So let's get some practice in. Just starting in an attention stance. Stepping with the left leg, 1, 2, the big danger with the long front stance, especially when you're doing the thrust, is bending your back over to get that forward momentum and that extra extension. Keep the back straight, guys, okay? We need to push the hips forward and the knee forward. It's like a deep lunge almost. 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's do right leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, nice. We're going to walk the floor, right, with our long front stance this time. Keep all the principles in mind. Make sure we're focused too. Sometimes you can start doing a class or a workout and you're following along with every word I say. You're following along and you're like, okay, and you start thinking about other things that are happening in your day. So guys, let's stay focused on the class. Step, in and out, about 70-30. Okay, we're going to turn around and go back. Again, as much distance as you have, you might not have this much space. Maybe you had to turn around already. That's cool. Let's just get the reps in. All right, again, this time we're going to be coming backward when we're done. Okay, good deep stance. It feels a little different now that we're not striking with it, right? We're just stepping. That's okay. There's a lot of power and presence in how you stand. Going backward. Keeping that 70-30. A little challenging. Freeze. Okay, is it still a long front stance? My knees are bent a little, front, back's barely bent. Good angle, nice. All right, good. Let's grab our trusty staff. And we're going to get some work in on the front thrust, okay? So, what I'll do here, just face this direction so you can see me, but we're going to do a front thrust into a right long front stance. Being especially careful about that back being straight, right guys? Here, 1, wringing my hand, pushing out, a lot of extension. 2, 3, 4, 5, Very powerful motion, especially in our kata. This is what I'll call a power move. We put a lot behind it. We usually have a yell there as well. Switch. Okay. Left dominant, left long front stance. 1. 2. Shoot. 3. Shoot. 4. 5. Okay, we're going to get some distance work. We're going to actually do the stepping across the floor, guys. Right side first. You might not have a lot of space for this one. You might break some furniture, so just do as much as you can. You have to do it stationary, that's also fine. Switch. Okay, other side. And time. Good job, guys. Okay, so we got some work in on our front stance, our long front stance. Okay, next up, we're going to move into the horse stance. Okay, let's move into the horse stance. This is actually the horse riding stance is a full name for it. Our legs are wider apart, wider than shoulder width. Our knees are going to be bent, okay, like we're sitting down, okay, riding a horse, and we're kind of sitting down into that seat. And by that I mean we're not leaning forward over the toes, or we're leaning more, have a little more weight onto your heels, right, like a good squat. Now, we don't have to be really, really low and go like parallel to the ground. We also don't want to be too high either, so we kind of want to get in the middle there. You're going to feel a burn into your legs when you're doing a proper horse stance, but not so much that just totally knocks you out. And that just kind of depends on your leg strength, though. We do want to watch out for kind of leaning over towards the end as we're practicing the horse stance, though. So when we actually do engage, even if you can't hold it for very long, that's okay, but engage and do a good horse stance with that back straight, the head is up, and it gives you a good, strong foundation and base. So from this side, let's do the horse stance together. My legs are exactly in line. All 10 toes are facing forward. Okay. So we're going to get some movement work in. So what we're going to do is a horse stance, and then step, turn, horse stance. Do your best to keep it in line. Step, turn. Now, my shoulders are square in this case. Step, turn. In contrast to like the front stance. Step, turn. Okay, nice. Let's grab our staff. So we actually use the horse stance in various spots, especially throughout the kata that we do, or the katas. One technique, of course, is the overhead strikes, like the overhead rib strike. So we're in our horse stance. Knees are bent. Back is straight. Got some engagement in my core. Okay, stay with me. Overhead rib. Overhead rib. Overhead rib. Overhead rib. Let's switch. Other dominant side. Overhead rib. 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 Okay, nice. So let's get a little bit of movement work in. Overhead rib. Turn. Overhead rib. Overhead rib. Okay, nice. Okay, so when you actually sit down into that horse stance, when you're doing your kata, make sure it's powerful, it's strong. You're there, all 10 toes are facing forward, your back is straight. We're going to move into a stance briefly here, and that's the back stance. We don't use it a whole lot, but we do sometimes. The way that we do our back stance. Now our front stance, let's say we go to our front stance. Our back stance, what we take is our back leg. We point the toes like to a 90-degree angle to the right, for example. My front toes are just about facing forward. My back side is facing about the right 90. And it's called a back stance because I have a little bit more weight on the back side. About 60% on the back, about 40 on the front. This is our back stance. So a little more reserved, a little bit more defensive and prepared rather than launching out, sort of lunging all out attacks like we do in our front and our long front stances. So our back stance, if you want to get to it, one way to do it too is like make an L with your feet, with your heels touching. Now take your right leg, just bring it straight back. Slide the left leg forward a little bit. Bend your knees. I'm pretty bladed. I'm actually a little bit more bladed than on my front stance. My shoulders and my chest should be almost a little bit more angled to the side in a back stance. 60-40. Okay, other side. 60-40. Okay. Let's get a stepping practice in. Back stance. Back stance. Hup. 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 Okay, turn around. Hup. 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 Nice. Okay, let's get some practice in. One technique we tend to do into a back stance quite often is an uppercut. So our uppercut strike, we'll pull out to a back stance. Let's get some reps in. Right hand dominant. That's one. That's two. 3. 4. 5. Switch, left hand dominant. I row, I step, I do the uppercut to a back stance, torque my body like I'm doing an uppercut punch, and I also had the pull motion on the back side, so it's a push and pull uppercut with the rowing. It's 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. Alright guys, nice. Set this aside. For the last major stance today that we want to talk about, it's the fighting stance, or I often call it the basic fighting stance, because there really are a lot of little variations to how you can fight. You could call this a sparring stance, fighting stance, defensive stance, self-defense stance, whatever. But it's related to our combat bow practice, right? Because our combat bow practice is freestyle, totally different. We're not going to be fighting someone walking around like this and changing different stances. Those stances have their place in training our legs, our muscles, our muscle memory, our body alignment. A lot of the reasons that kata training even was created originally for real warriors that were, they actually practiced to go into war, into the battlefield with. But of course, once we actually practice the free-flowing combat bow form, we're like, hey, we need a stance that makes more sense here. That's the basic fighting stance. The basic fighting stance is, to get to it, we can take our right leg out like shoulder width, slide it forward, bend your knees, turn your left leg out to like a 45-degree angle, and kind of just bend both of your knees. There's a pretty good balance here. I really don't have too much lean on the front or the back. My body is bladed some. I don't want to be totally square. Of course, if I was empty-handed, right, I would probably be like this. This could just be a good fighting, sparring, defensive stance in its own right. So it's similar to our front stance, but the difference is it's going to be a little bit wider on the back side. The back leg's going to be out a little bit further. Okay, the front leg can actually be turned a little bit. My knees are both bent, a similar level, and it's very loose, very loosey-goosey, right? and we want to have very fluid movements, so that means we have very even weight distribution. We translate that to holding a staff. It's the same thing. But when we practice our combat techniques, I've got this fighting stance. You'll see me actually vary it a little bit. Sometimes I'll be a little more bladed. Sometimes I'll be a little bit more straight on. But I'm never really totally straight on squared. There's always going to be some blade with the lead arm, the lead leg forward. So if you want to get into a right basic fighting stance, and I'm just holding my staff, basic, in thirds, or really in quarters here. This is my normal combat hold. And what this does is it allows us to practice good footwork, stepping forward, stepping backward, blocking, striking, defenses, everything that we do in our curriculum. That's very loose, very fluid. That's our basic fighting stance. So to get some practice in, we're just going to practice a couple of our combat strikes. Like combat strike number 1, for example, is coming up high, down and across. Here. Strike number 2 is a descending strike at a down angle. 1, 2. So the stance allows me to really just step, move my hips, be light on the balls of my feet. That's another thing I actually want to point out. I'm pretty light on the balls of my feet. I'm not flat-footed when I'm in this stance all the time. I might start that way, but once I really start moving, I'm more on the balls of my feet, and my heels aren't directly touching the ground always. That lets me move around much faster. Okay, so let's switch sides. Okay, angle, strike number 2 and number 1. Number 2 and number 1. 2 and 1. Now we do footwork in a lot of other classes too as well, but let's take a quick look at it. So for moving forward, you move the right leg forward and then left leg back. Backward, left leg first and then right leg. We always take the lead leg moves first in the direction that we want to go. If we go to the right, it's right, left, right. Still in that basic fighting stance. Right, left, right. Okay, and take a look at the distance of my legs from my hips. Okay, I'm not too bladed or straight. Okay, because we're doing things like thrust, one arm thrust, speed strikes. We're changing positions to long hold, to reverse hold, lots of other cool stuff in combat bow. So that's our basic fighting stance, guys. All right, nice. Okay, quick review, then we're going to cool down. So, today we learned our front stance. Do it with me, please. Other side. Long front stance. Other side. Horse stance. There's not really an other side. Back stance. Other side. And basic fighting stance. Other side. Nice. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed that class. Let's go ahead, get cooled down, stretch out a little bit. Let's put our feet together. Let's take a deep breath in. Raise our hands over our head. Go down. Up. Down. Up. Down. All right, grab your left foot is fine. Pull it straight behind you. Stretching out the thigh there, the quadricep. If you really do those stances right, should be a pretty good leg workout as well. Then obviously when you combine that with your arms, as you guys already know at this point, if you've done plenty of bow classes, it can really work you out. Well, it depends on how hard you push your body, intensity level wise. Maybe if you're not in good enough shape yet or you're afraid to hurt yourself, that's understandable too. But if you're able to push yourself, let's switch. And if your staff is heavy enough too, because if you have a very lightweight staff, That's very different, okay? If you're training like with a 10-ounce staff, get a 2-pound one if you can for your training practice, because it's going to build so much more muscle and speed. And once you pick one of those lightweight staffs, maybe because you want to do a tournament competition or whatever it may be, you're going to be so much faster. You have total control over it. Okay, let's pull up, hug our knee to our chest. Okay, switch sides. If you need to balance, try to do your best to pull up and then stand next to a wall if you need to here. You can also do this lying on your back and get a pretty good stretch. Okay, let's sit down. Put your left leg out. Tuck your right foot in. Put it onto your left. Turn and look over your right shoulder. Look over your left shoulder. Switch. Look over your left shoulder. And your right shoulder. Okay, and let's do a deep yogic squat. This is a good pelvic floor stretch. Okay, push with your elbows to the inside of your thighs. Straighten your back out. Totally relax the pelvic floor muscles. On time. All right. Good class today, guys. Hope you learned something. At the least, I wanted you to become more aware of the importance of your stances when you're practicing and learning the traditional techniques in the kata especially. And then that basic fighting stance, a pretty free-flowing stance. If you've done any sparring or fighting, you'll probably be able to find your own flow. Everyone's got a little different way of doing it. That's why I call it a basic fighting stance, because down the line, when you become more advanced in bow fighting, you'll kind of develop your own style. And that's a cool thing about it. But for now, that's a good basic place to start practicing your combat moves. I'll see you guys in the next class.